Okay, good. So we've got this beautiful bank of flowers here. We've got primarily shades of red. Pink is basically a dilute red in our watercolor world. And so I think of this as primarily a red based floral arrangement with some greens. So when it comes to red, we talked about it briefly. We've got color harmonies of red, where the red, when it gets more sunlit, is going to look more orange. More yellow will be in that red. And when it looks more shadowy, it's going to move toward the violet. So I know that I'm going to want to be creating color harmonies that are kind of moving along this part of the color wheel. And in doing so, my lighter portions are going to feel more sunlit, and my darker portions are going to feel more shadowed. So, you know, what colors would I use? Well, really, you could use any red you would like. For me, I think what I'll do is clean this up so I've got a clean palette. And I'll just go for some color harmonies of red here. And I'll show you on my palette, and then we'll bring it to the painting. Okay, so let's say I wanted to make my permanent rose kind of the primary pink or red that I would use.
Now that's staining, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, sure is.
You said that with such joy.
Yep. And so, you know, I can make it less pink by adding more water. I can make it darker by adding more pigment, but it's only going to get that dark. What if I wanted it to be a little bit darker? Well, I could go into my alizarin crimson. That's moving darker. I could also come down here and I could get my permanent magenta, which is leaning more toward the shadow version of red. So I could get that out. Permanent magenta. And of course, if I really wanted to move toward violet, I could get my ultramarine violet out, which has quite a bit of blue in it. If that was too blue, I could mix it with my permanent magenta, and I could get more of a redder, pink, you know, pinkier violet. So that's kind of a nice bunch of hues there. But what if I took that rose, and what if I added a little bit of a more orangey color to it, or maybe I add a little bit of Quin Gold. What would I get then? Oh, that's kind of nice. It's that same pink that I started out with, but it's got a little bit sunnier hue to it. And what if I added some new gamboge to that? Oh, same pink, but it's a little bit more orangey yet.
Does Rossiana have any place in any?
Yeah, that's a little more neutralized. Let's check it out. Here's my raw sienna.
I don't know if it would be in that.
Yeah, I think it could be. My raw sienna is a little bit dry here. Okay, well if I add some of that pink to that, yeah, it's a little more mellow orange. Yeah, but a little more mellow orange, but that's okay. But you see how to get color harmonies for that color, I can add yellow, I can add violet, but I'm still using that one color as kind of my foundation. So what might I do if I were to approach doing these flowers? Well, a lot of times what I like to do is be spontaneous at first. And so I like to spatter. And I know this is not everyone's way, but for me, for me, this is the general shape is that of kind of a shallow triangle. And so I'm going to try to kind of create a general triangular shape. And I like these torn edges as a shield because they look a little bit more organic. They're not quite so straight, which feels a little bit more like flowers. You know, they don't line up like soldiers. So to tear a little bit of an irregular edge can be a nice thing. So here I've got my basic shield going. And so I'm going to start, I think I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow. I kind of liked that New Gamboge and what that did. So I might start with a little bit of yellow. And then I might quickly add some of my basic color to that. And then maybe I'll add a little bit of water. This is just dirty water. But it's going to read as somewhat pink because I had pink on my brush. But it's also going to help some of those little shapes that I've made conjoin into bigger shapes. So now I'm going to just kind of draw from some of these puddles on my palette. And I'm going to get some spontaneity here. I think I might let it go up just a little bit higher, just by virtue of dipping into different areas on my palette every time I go to the well, so to speak. I think I'll come in here where it's a little more orange. And then I might add some shadow too. So I'll come over here where it's a little violet. So now I've got these sort of spontaneous mixtures of color. And if I lift up my shield, I can kind of see what I have. That's kind of a nice foundation. Now my job is to not let it look as if it's just a bunch of spattered flowers. So I can get my brush in there and I can take some cues from my photo reference to try to like maybe make some of these kind of drip down a little bit. Maybe I can tuck in more shadow, more deep shadow here and there. I don't want to eliminate all of the light, all of the white, because some of the flowers are white, but I might put in the foundations. I don't think I'm going to go for a lot of dark shadow in this first go round. I think I'm going to let these colors kind of stay pure. And in this color family, I'm going to sort of make some marks down here that might be some of these groups of flowers that are kind of down here. We don't really see through these flowers quite so much, but I don't want it to be static, so I'm going to make sure that I bring some of these different colors into that mix too. Maybe a little bit of violet under the base of the flowers. And I see some up here too. So those flowers are kind of off in the distance. I'm going to try to keep, oops,
Sorry.
it's okay. I'm going to try to keep these boundaries irregular.
Yes, but I'll take a break.
Where my colors get a little muddy, where the violet might be combining with the yellow, I can always take my damp brush and lift that up if it's offensive, and just overpower it with more pure color. But some neutralization of color isn't such a bad thing. I'm just kind of using the tip of my brush to kind of join some of these shapes. And I'm not going in for the greens right away. I'm letting these colors kind of remain pure and setting the foundations for the flowers, because to me the flowers are the most important thing, and the greens are going to be supporting cast. So I'm going to let them kind of fill in ways that I feel like they're helpful after I get these flowers established. Now I don't like this little dot down here at all. This has just gotten really muddy in color. It's basically yellow and violet together, so I'm just going to lift that up, and I'm going to go back to the well to some pure pink and just kind of bring that in there. That's better. But one of the things I like about having those drips as my foundation is that they're spontaneous. They don't look repetitive. There's that sort of natural feeling attached to them that I really enjoy. So I use that technique a lot, as you've noticed. Now I also like the fact that it leaves me sparkles of white in the midst of that sea of color. I'm going to do just a little blotting there so that I can bring some variation of color to this little swatch. Wherever I see a swatch that looks a little too uniform, I'm going to try to bring some variation of color. But overall, I think I'm kind of liking where that's going. I might do just a little lifting in here to say that there might be some light flowers here and there. And if I tuck a little dark in next to that, then all of a sudden the lights become even lighter. The dark at this point is violet. Now there's flowers in the photo that I really like that are kind of trailing up this window. I think they're quite lovely. So I'm going to try to capture those here.
And did you demo the window in your painting?
I haven't yet. No, I haven't. But I can. So I'm going to bring just a little bit of yellow up here. Just to kind of amplify the fact that there might be some sunlight hitting it. And then there's some on this side as well. This looks a little static, so I think what I'm going to do is just lift a little bit and yeah, I like that better. And then there's also flowers up here in this corner, so I think I'll just adding water now to get some of these light pinks. Okay, so just the pinks and the shades of pink are what I would start out with. And then after this has a chance to dry, then I'm going to go in with the more shadowy forms. That would be more violet and green, to just sort of tell the story of where the shadows are. Now I also have dark, real dark underneath this awning, and because of that, I'm going to want to find that dark that's on the underside of the awning underneath my flowers here too. So that's going to give me an opportunity to do some negative painting and some shaping of these flowers. So that's, you know, if this ends up feeling too static, I could always go over it. Like this might end up feeling a little bit less textured than this. So once it dries, I could go over it again with a few more marks to sort of give the impression of texture. But my negative painting can be a really helpful thing too. Like let's say I go in here with some green. This is my jadeite green, but I could mix a green too with my Prussian and with the yellow that I already made or already used. And so once this is more dry, it's a little more dry over here now, I could think about coming in with some green and putting in some of the shadow that I see underneath this area especially. And then there's some shadow also on top of some of this in the reference. And so this dark is also going to make the light areas pop. I don't want one note of dark though, so I'm going to go in with this other green and just find some sunnier. Well, in theory that's supposed to be sunnier green, so let's make it sunnier. Yeah, I want some lighter notes of green here and there too. That looks a little predictable. Looks, I don't know, it just looks too predictable, so I'm going to lift some of that. Wherever things begin to look a little too repetitive, especially when it comes to foliage, I like to make edits. So here I'm just softening. That looks a little less predictable to me, so I'm going to call that good. Now, the other color I love to use in foliage is my ultramarine violet. And I just think it's just a nice color that seems to read as dark, and it plays well with the pinks and the greens. Where the green and the violet mix, they just make, I think, a very pleasant dark. So I'm going to put that in under here. And it looks pretty dark, pretty black, but there's color. And this is going to show that there's actually a deep recession underneath that awning. But I'm going to bring it up and through the flowers too, because that shadow is in and around and through these flowers. There needs to be some linkage between these shadows as they move in, around, and through. Do you feel the form taking shape?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think,
it reminds me of the hydrangea painting.
ah,
Yeah, sorry. Except he's here.
but linking these darks in and around and through, I think is really important. It really just gives volume, I think, and dimension to what could otherwise be kind of just a static scene. Oh, and then there's There's shadow under here. I'll just simplify it. I don't know why I'm working with such dry pigment. I like to be able to reach into that well and get juicy paint, and I'm just not doing it today. I love, though, that these colors are kind of mixing and mingling because they're still wet. And this shadow is also over here. And then we've got that shadow on top of the awning here too. It's a soft shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the whole awning. And then I'm just going to tuck it in to the area that is in shadow. So I see it as a warm shadow in the photo. I see a lot of warmth in that shadow. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of raw sienna or yellow ochre, kind of set the tone. It's soft. And it's kind of under all this. And it connects with the shadow behind. And then I'm going to kind of turn it more gray because I know that cobalt and raw sienna make a very nice gray. I'll show you here. Kind of a greenish gray, but I'm okay with that. And because that whole awning is wet, I'm getting a very soft sense of shadow that I can easily kind of tickle. And make it a little bit more irregular. There, so I've got a little shadow. So I think the thing to do with your foliage then is once these colors kind of set up and are not quite so fluid, you can kind of come in here and you can find little bits of foliage where you feel like you need them. I would mix some greens so that your greens kind of vary. Let them be bluer in places that might be more in shadow, like up in here. Maybe even more blue. And then maybe they'll be a little bit brighter, lighter, a little more yellow out here in the sunlight. And you can kind of tuck them into the spaces between your flowers or where you feel like you need separation and a big glob of color. You can tap a little bit of your foliage in there to kind of create, with negative painting, the sense of flowers that might be more separate. So I kind of like the fact that it's still just a little bit wet, because now my foliage is kind of mixing and mingling just a little bit softly here and there. To me, it looks more watercolory. Like I'm not trying to be so specific, you know. I'm kind of letting the paint tell the story a little bit. So where I've got a big glob of color, like out here, I might touch it a little bit with some green here and there to just say, okay, well, it's not really just a blob of color. There's more going on there. So that's kind of what I do. Why is that so lagging
I
behind?
know. That's pretty.
A violet in there can be a way to take that green and turn it dark here and there. Yeah, I really love that ultramarine violet. When it comes to shadows in the foliage, I think it just plays well with others. In fact, I might bring it up here in the window too. Now, when it comes to the windows, you basically have you have a couple things going on. You've got the sky being reflected in some of these windows. This light is basically the sky, and it's a gray day. So we have a light gray. And you'll notice on these windows, and this is always true when we're looking at a window that is angled. Windows that are angled are, we will only see the far side of that window. We won't see the near side. And we'll often see the top of the underside of the top of the window as well. And so you really see that on this side of the building for sure. Now going in the other direction, it's the opposite, right? We don't see the near side on this side, but we do see the far side of the window, and we see the underside of the window or the awning. So just pay attention to that and know that the underside of the window is probably going to be the darkest, or the underside of the top of the window will be the darkest part of the frame. And the sides will be getting a little more reflected light than the tops of the windows. The tops of the windows will be the darkest. So if I were to paint that, I'm gonna look for here. I've got the top of the arch like that. I'm gonna make that dark. It's basically a warm dark. So I'll go in with a little bit of yellow first. And then I'll turn it gray.
So what is arch, not all of them?
Yeah, just this one.
The main one.
So, and then it's quite dark behind it as well. So I'm going to make sure that this is a little bit darker over here to give that sense of shadow. The negative spaces are going to be dark on that side of the window. Over here, it's going to be the far edge of the window that is shadowed. We're seeing these big window casings because these are old stucco buildings. so that the underside is going to be in shadow. Well, it would help if I got some paint. I'm gonna get a gray here, kind of come in here. It gets consistently lighter as it comes down. It's going to be the darkest closest to the top. And then the awning comes out, and we're just seeing, on the awning, we're just seeing, let's see, I gotta draw it in there.
I don't know, we're so far behind at this point. I don't know.
Is it, you can't see it? I know, that's the problem with trying to film it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it'll catch up, but right now it's, we can't see it. It's not looking at it.
But you'll put this one on YouTube.
Yeah, I will.
And it doesn't do this on YouTube.
No, 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 it'll be static, I think. So we'll see the underside. So I've got this kind of light window casing, and then the window itself is quite dark on this side. So I'll just mix up a dark with burnt sienna and some ultramarine blue and just tuck in that dark. And I'll just kind of paint around these flowers. Now there is some little awning detail there that you could think about scratching in if you wanted to. There are also some flowers that extend up there. And I'm going to bring a little bit of dark up there. Well, anyway, I could fuss around with this all afternoon, but I think you get the idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and this one, you've got this paned window. So you could go into the shadow area with that dark color underneath the flowers and just kind of portray this shadow. And then find the mullions.
Very nice, which I usually nice work.
Well, you know, it's just a quick demonstration for you of the whole process, but I think hopefully it gives you an idea of how I basically approach it. And if I had a sky color, I would echo it in this window down here. Okay, so